longer passage. Would someone like to read it for us? Debbie, do you feel comfortable reading it?
Sure, I can read it. Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Yes, please.
Okay, somehow I lost. Oh, there we go. Then they sailed to the country of Gadarenes, which is opposite Galilee. And when he stepped out on the land, there met him a certain man from the city who had demons for a long time. And he wore no clothes, nor did he live in a house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out, fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man, for it had often seized him, and he was kept under guard, bound with chains and shackles, and he broke the bonds and was driven by the demon into the wilderness. Jesus asked him, saying, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," because many demons had entered him, and they begged him that he would not command them to go out into the abyss. Now a herd of many swine was feeding there on the mountain, so they begged him that he would permit them to enter them, and he permitted them. Then the demons went out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd ran violently down the steep place into the lake and drowned. When those who fed them saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then they went out to see what had happened and came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had departed, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. They also, who had seen it, told them by what means he who had been demon possessed was healed. Then the whole multitude of the surrounding region of the Gadarenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. And he got into the boat and returned. Now the man from whom the demons had departed begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your own house and tell what great things God has done for you." And he went his way and proclaimed throughout the whole city what great things Jesus had done for him.
Okay, thank you, Debbie.
Mhm.
So Mark, we're at 8:26 through 39. Okay. Um, okay, so interesting story. Just saying one of my favorites for whatever reason. I don't know. I guess we're all drawn to certain passages. Ironically, we always read this story around Halloween, but there's no, like Orthodox connection. Like it just happens to always fall around Halloween. Okay. It's just sort of I don't know. Well, maybe providentially, right? Nothing happens without providence, but there's no purpose for us doing it, as far as I know. Um, it's also recorded by Mark and Matthew, so obviously an important story. Okay, so so what? Okay, so Jesus is going back and forth across the lake. So he was on the other side, in Capernaum. They crossed the lake. There was the storm. He calms the winds, right? Everything was calm. Now he comes to this other side of the lake and he meets this man who's demon possessed. Now, actually, Mark, or I don't know, I forget if it's Mark or Matthew, they report two men. Okay. Um, Here, reported as this one guy. Maybe he's the leader, so to speak. Um, so it's probably Gentile territory. How do we know that? Why would we suspect that it's Gentile territory? Because what are they raising? Pigs.
Mhm.
Pigs. Okay. So, that gives us a clue that it's probably, a non-Jewish area. Okay. So he's, he probably grew up in that city. He's there and at some point becomes demon possessed, which, in a lot of these pagan religions, that was kind of the point sometimes in their worship was to become possessed. Um, you know, that was part of their rituals. I don't know. We don't know if, this was why this guy got possessed, but not necessarily uncommon. But obviously things went very awry for him, that he's chained up, trying to, they're trying to keep him under control. He breaks the chains. He's living in the tombs, right? So, sort of living like a wild animal just out amongst the outskirts of the city. Okay. And obviously he's very, very tormented and very sick. It says there, he had demons for a long time. So he's been suffering for a very long time with this. So what else do you notice there at the beginning? That first paragraph. So, Jesus arrives, and what does the guy do? Okay. And what does he say?
Don't torment me.
Yep. But what a little bit before that?
Oh, Jesus, Son of the Most High God.
Right. Right. So he knows something about Jesus that other people don't know. Right? Because a lot of people aren't like, when we get to chapter 9, if we get there tonight, we're going to have the dialogue where Jesus asks the disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" Okay. We'll save that, but no one is saying, in answer to that question, no one is saying Jesus is the Son of the Most High God. Like, no one is saying that according to their answer, okay, in chapter 9.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there is some type of word getting out to the
Right.
community.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But perhaps not as this man is not as isolated as.
Perhaps. So maybe he knows the word. Mm-hmm. Could be.
But the Son of the Most High God.
Right.
Says, I mean,
Right. So what does that indicate? Mel, you have a thought? Right. So the implication is that the demons recognize him as their God. Right.
And they say the Pharisees were not demon possessed.
Maybe they were the ones demon possessed, right? Yeah. The demons know who he is. I remember those other times, I mean, we sort of had indications of this. We know who you are, Jesus. If you're doing the daily readings, I think it might have even been today in Mark, where Jesus goes to the synagogue, there's a man demon possessed and cries out, "I know who you are, Jesus, Son of the Most High God." So this idea that the demons know who Jesus is, in their spiritual realm, right? Now, obviously they're talking through the man, right? It's not really the man who's speaking, which indicates, that next line there, when Jesus asked, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," because there's many demons in him. Okay. Then we have, I always, and I think I pointed out in my homily, month or two ago, and we read this in Matthew, I believe. That question, "What have I to do with you?" It's a strong, powerful statement. Like, he knows he's got nothing in common with Christ. The demon inside, right? Right. So they know they've got nothing in common with Christ. Okay, but they recognize him,
Father.
Yeah,
So I guess I think Jesus would have come across many people, maybe not all demon possessed, but needed his help.
right.
Now, is it that I know somewhere it says if everything was written down, we could not
Right,
contain all those books.
right.
But I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but is it like set up so that he meets certain people s- for the message that happens when he meets them?
Hmm. Yeah, kind of. I mean, again, nothing happens randomly and nothing happens, just by fate or anything like that. So, yeah, providentially speaking, you'd probably say everything is done according to the will of God. There's no chance meetings per se. Because there
Mhm.
was a lot, again, there's a lot of people demon possessed,
Right.
a lot of people sick. Jesus doesn't heal everybody. Like,
Mhm.
and we know that even in the book of Acts, because Peter and John healed somebody in the book of Acts, someone who's paralyzed laying at the temple. Well, why didn't Jesus heal that guy when he was alive, a couple months prior, when he was at the temple? Well, who knows? Like, Jesus didn't heal everybody um, that was sick or tormented at that time. So, yeah, I mean, I would say, everything has a providential purpose.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um,
They know the time.
Not per se, but they had an indication that this was not yet the time. hmm Um, yeah, I think in one of the gospel accounts it adds, it's not quite their time. Um, so when it says legion, that's referred to a Roman legion, which is 20,000 troops. So it doesn't necessarily mean exactly 20,000 demons are in the man, but it's a lot. It's, this guy's opened himself up to something. Now, what about where it says that he would command them not to go into the abyss? What do you think that means or indicates? Okay. Yep. Chaos, hell. You think about in Genesis, the beginning of Genesis, the waters of chaos, the abyss. So the abyss really had more of a connotation of the ocean, the deep, the whirlpool, getting sucked into the deep. Okay. Yes. No, you're fine.
Have no power of creation. How do they then get it?
So you have to let them in and correct. You have to do it. No, usually you have to purposefully let them in. So if you're fooling around with astrology, Ouija boards, okay, occult like things in modern times, that's the kind of stuff. But back then, like part of their religious rituals were to invite the demons, the gods. Okay, so that was again sort of normal for their religious practices. Yeah.
Messing with all this stuff and putting skeletons in front of your house, those kinds of. Wouldn't that be something that you open yourself up because you basically like invited?
If you take it too far, it certainly could. But people are taking things darker, you know. So it's not just, when I was a kid, you dressed up like Superman and it was all about just getting candy. People, I think there's still an element of that, and there's still can be an innocence there, but um yeah, people are definitely taking it to an extreme. Mhm.
That's kind of the. All the demons are cast into the.
Correct.
So, give me the final judgment.
Correct. So, right. He knows there's going to be a final judgment, but he's thinking, well, there should be more time. Like to your earlier comment, before the time. So,
Maybe they're all the same, So from birth, the son could not speak or hear or see. The woman who was constantly bleeding, is the root of all of these human frailties because of demons?
Is it all spiritual?
I mean, it's
no.
not, so this is one type of
Yeah.
healing in a sense.
Right.
So there's different ways, different reasons for people to need the healing.
Yes.
Well, this is spiritual healing.
So is there,
There's also physical healing.
Right.
So I think Luke, being a physician, knows the difference between the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
good
I mean,
distinction.
a lot of people
too.
think that people who lived back then were kind of, crude or lacking in knowledge, and that, they would attribute physical illness to the demons, but that's not what Luke is saying here.
So if you couldn't hear Kathy, she was asking, well, what about, Jesus has done healings, physical healings, and are they attributed to demonic activity? And the answer would be no. So there's two types, Luke is distinguishing between physical healing, like the one with the flow of blood, or the paralytic, as compared to this person and a few others who are demon possessed. Okay. So just because you're physically ill doesn't mean you're demon possessed. The demon possessed would obviously be a spiritual. Yeah.
Right, that's where my mind was going, because some people say, well,
Basically,
you're, something happened in your past, whether it was your past or your parents' past, of why you have this trauma.
Right. So that was the man born blind. So they're at Katya and Kathy are asking, well, what about, is any physical illness attributed to, maybe an ancestor sin or something? And Christ answers that no, not this man born blind. It's not his fault. It's not his parents' fault. There's not an ancestral curse that's being attributed to this. Okay. Now we all get ill because of sin, like in the sense of Adam and Eve, and we live in a fallen world, and now we're mortal. So yes, you can attribute all illness originally to sin, but it's not because necessarily you committed some certain sin that you're being punished.
Oh, the door closed.
Zoom, Bible, I'm on Bible study.
That's why we have illnesses and diseases that we.
Right.
Because there are some that interpret it that all of our illnesses can be attributed to some type of lack of faith. You just pray.
Yeah, that's not Orthodox understanding.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So again, if you couldn't hear Kathy, if some people would say all illness is due to a lack of faith, and that's not what we believe. You know, we're all going to get sick and die unless Jesus returns while we're alive.
Right, so we're all gonna get sick and die, but we're not all gonna die because we're sick. We can, in a physical sense, so we, you know, so it's okay to take medicine.
Yes. 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 It's okay to take medicine. It's okay to go to the doctor. As Mark said, Luke was a physician. So yeah, all these things are gifts of God. But again, you can't make an idol out of anything. Like you can make an idol out of your health by trying to be like this. I don't know. These people again get on YouTube and they're into just everything about their health, physical health. Well, that's not good either, right? That's an extreme. You start getting into vanity and pride and arrogance. So yeah, we're to be healthy. We're not to abuse our bodies. But you can't just say and someone's illness is directly attributable to a fault or a sin. Yeah.
Thinking with all those advances in medicine and technology. I think it's all from the devil anyway, but when a person is ill because of a spiritual reason, and they're a big pharma company, some kind of crap they just cooked up, like whatever, immunosuppressants or whatever, and as if they're trying to heal it, but I'm not thinking. Then I know medicine, but some things are just obvious. So, would it mean that they are basically creating a sin against
I mean, human created that, so.
humanity itself because they are, because we're supposed to just basically live our life with what was given to us, like illness or family circumstances or whatever, and basically just be patient and just live through it, kind of like carry your cross. And
Yeah, that's like the argument against certain taking medicines and vaccines and stuff like that, God created smallpox,
Yes,
so who are we to destroy it?
but the God kind of, if the God allows us to come across some practitioner who offers you treatment, so nothing is done on its own. I mean, God obviously had some type of his ways to some like providence and
Well, I think there's ways that we take care of ourselves that are reasonable. But working in healthcare for a long time, like at some point the scale tips, and when you're trying to do a lot of heroic measures, you're maybe spending a lot of money on experimental treatments, like you're kind of, again, you're putting too much worth on this life. You have to resign yourself to, you have to prepare your soul, to meet God. Now where that line is, I mean, it's hard to know exactly where that line is. You got to kind of pray about it and figure that out for yourself, and do what's according to your conscience too, um and make sure that you're preparing spiritually. That's the number one thing. Right.
Good thing that somebody has been given the gift of discovery, manufacture, whatever, to get it to us. I feel that is,
Yeah, the wisdom of Sirach talks about that in the Bible. It's in our Bible, not the Protestant Bible. Not really, nothing explicit. It's hard to, you have to.
God's door or what, but if God is giving that grace. And the healing comes from God. He's directing their path.
And the marking from the payback from the kickback from the big farmer. I mean, I know that it's not funny, but
Well,
I
he
mean,
would have
it's
use
so
in every
confusing.
situation.
Yeah.
But as far as God's providence directing people towards a cure, I think that, that's part of God's plan.
Well, also Kathy, what you said, that God created smallpox virus, that's not true because a virus by its very, very definition is something that's parasitic. Okay,
A virus technically can't live outside.
and what I'm
of
saying is the
Yeah.
virus is a result of the fallen world. It's not something God created.
It's demonic. So since
Now,
God is
I'm not
good-
saying it's demonic.
No,
It's just
I'm
as
not
it is.
saying it's
no, I was
demonic.
just gonna say that
Yeah.
since everything God is good, everything he created is good. So nothing bad comes out from God. So if something bad happens, it's probably
From a fallen world. We're back into the chaos,
When Adam and Eve sinned, the world fell.
right? And things got disordered.
And that's what happened. Disease is everything.
The good things can
They
still
agree.
come to us through the grace of God.
Right. And God gives us, right, but any gift can be abused. Okay, I could, if you need $1,000 to buy a car, I can give you $1,000 and then you go out and, I don't know, buy drugs with it. Well, you had a need. I helped you with the need, but then you abused it, right? So everything in this fallen world has a good side and a dark side. You can use it for good or you can use it for evil. Free will, right. Okay, so let's get back to the text. So then the swine run down the mountain. Okay. And so what do you think about this? Like, okay, so they say, well, we don't want to go back to the abyss, which means, think of the whirlpool or the deep ocean that's stormy, right? So there's a herd of many swine. They begged him that he would permit them to enter the swine. Okay. So he permitted them. Right. And then what did they do? Right. And drowned. So what does that say? Well, okay, but the swine didn't know. They're just right. But okay, but just think about it this way, and this I'll move on to the point that I'm trying to make, that they're trying to control this guy. Then Jesus frees the man, but then they can't even control swine. So they have no power over creation, to the earlier question. Okay.
Because swine don't have free will.
Right. Swine don't have free will.
People do.
Right. Okay. So, and what they're asking for really, and Father Stephen DeYoung makes this point in his commentary about it, Lord of Spirits, not the Lord of Spirits, the Full Counsel of God on Ancient Faith, that what they're essentially are asking Christ for is they want a little bit more time to wreak havoc. Like, don't throw us into the abyss. We don't want to be judged yet. Just let us go into the swine. So Christ allows them to go in the swine, but then they can't. The swine destroy themselves. Like they can't control. Right. Right. Right.
We see in many ancient Sumerian.
Right.
inscriptions
Right.
of
That's what they want. They want destruction. Okay. So then, how does the story then twist?
animals and human beings.
How does it flip?
Logically, it starts to make more sense. when we
Don't like it.
Well, okay, right. But what about right before that?
Oh.
give us their image after their likeness.
So what happens to the man? Where is he? He's sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. Okay, so that's where we want to be. We want to be at the feet of Jesus in our right mind, clothed and underneath him, underneath his protection, right? The Psalms say, you know, underneath the shadow of his wings, right? So that's where he is. So he's restored. He's in a great place. He's free. And you would think that these townspeople would be happy about it. I mean, here's this guy terrorizing them for years and years and years and years. And what do they ask Jesus to do? Worry about their possessions. They lost the swine. But then what do they say to Jesus? Leave. Yeah. And it also says there's seized with great fear. Okay. So they ask him to leave. Okay. So they don't want to understand. They don't ask him for teaching. They don't ask him for instruction. Okay. They just want him to go. Okay. And so what does he do? He goes. He leaves. Okay. He's going back to the other side. Okay. Now, what then does the man want from Jesus? Wants to go with them. Yeah. So why do you think Jesus would send him away? What? To convert the rest? Yeah, exactly. So Jesus is telling them, yeah, go back, return to your house, and tell them the great things God has done for you. Okay. So we all could be witnesses. What's the great things what's, the blessings that God has given us? How we tell people, well, God, did this for me. Okay. So he becomes an evangelist for his own people. And eventually this area will become Christian. I mean, I don't know who the exact people in this town would become Christian, but this would become a Christian area. And it's, in some ways a Christian area to this day, So this is northern Israel. This is where a lot of the fighting is, happening, right? These are the Palestinians, and many of whom are Christian. Okay? Yeah, he became an evangelist, right? Okay, so go home, tell your family the great things God has done for you. He could tell them how horrible his situation was. Don't be worshiping these demons. He could probably point, this is when this happened, when we did this. Get rid of this idol. Get rid of this. We're not going to do this ritual anymore, in our town. This is bad, bad news. Okay. Okay. Any further thoughts?
Father.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a question. These situations where Jesus heals demon-possessed people, is it all related to the Gentiles? Like, are the Jews ever demon-possessed and he healed them?
I believe so, because like I was referring to the section in Mark, I think it was from the reading from today, and Jesus is in the synagogue and the demon-possessed man comes into the synagogue. So presumably, I mean, it doesn't say exactly that he's Jewish, but we could assume, I think reasonably assume that, he was a Jewish man coming into the synagogue and he was demon-possessed.
So in the Jewish religion, is there anything like curing those that are demon-possessed?
Can you say more?
I mean, Jesus seems to be healing, the one doing all this, or maybe
Right.
they're even sending them to Jesus. So isn't the Jewish rabbis or, leaders or whatever able to also change people who are demon possessed?
So I do think there's probably some historical evidence that Jewish rabbis and priests would do exorcisms. We're going to get that I think, in a couple of chapters where someone is exorcising demons in Jesus' name, but he's not part of the 12. And so the 12 have a problem with it. So yeah, I think that there was probably some kind of exorcism, prayers. We mentioned Psalm 90 or 91, depending on the numbering. Is probably, we read that the 6th hour. And we talk about the demon of noonday, or the monastics talk about the demon of noonday. So that's, some people see that as a psalm of exorcism. Okay. We also do it at the funeral service in Panahita. You know, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High shall abide under the God of heaven. It's the way it begins. Psalm 90 or 91. So I think, Debbie, yes, I think that, and in the Greek pagan world, again, you know, this was their gods. You know, St. Paul says the gods of the Gentiles are demons. So when they're calling upon Zeus or Athena or any of these pagan gods, they're sort of a demonic power behind them. They're calling on demons to, you know, if you ever heard of the Oracle at Delphi, this famous, yeah, was, you know, the woman that sat in the tent or in the temple would get in herself into a trance, calling upon Zeus, I believe it was Zeus, and it would give you an omen. Like, so, you know, you'd ask, well, should I get married? Should I marry this woman or whatever? You know, am I going to have a good crop? And, you know, she would get into a trance and give you an answer. That was the Oracle at Delphi. You can look. Right. So again, she's getting into, you know, a state, or even shamans. You know, you might still see shamans in Africa or Asia or South America, and even people are dabbling in this stuff, you know, more and more, and they're really, really dangerous to open themselves up to a demonic.
Not owned by Jews, so therefore it was the group of people
Right.
outside
Right.
of the group that he was coming.
Right.
So it's not something wrong with the animal. It's
Correct.
just that
Yeah.
it's identifying the group
Right.
of people.
Right.
It could be any animal, right? If they were like goats or something, they'll be goats.
Yeah.
But the goats would have been owned by,
Jews.
so it's more of an identity.
Yeah, I mean, swine are unclean animals, so I mean, I think there's probably some symbolism there. And of course, with goats, you know, it's the goats on the left that are condemned, and you know, even some of the demonic imagery is of a goat head. So they've adopted some of this stuff themselves, like, you know, is it Baphomet? I think is sort of a common, I don't know, popular image or person entity that people are kind of fooling around with today. So no, I think the swine has more to do with the fact that they were Gentiles and Jews would not be having swine, presumably. They shouldn't when raising swine.
So so the whole story is an example to us. It's going to people that he's trying to bring into his new kingdom.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
collectively reject.
Right. Right. So Kathy asks also, is this an image too that Christ is going to new people? And yes, because he's going back, remember, he's going back and forth across the lake from the Jewish side to the Gentile side. Okay. Okay, so now he's going to go back. So let's go to verse 40. So let's read from 40 to 54. Mark, do you feel comfortable reading it since you're close?
Stop at 54 or 56?
Oh, 56.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it was when Jesus returned that the multitude welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And behold, there came a man named Jairus, and he was a ruler of the synagogue. And he fell down at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter about 12 years of age, and she was dying. But as he went, the multitudes thronged him. Now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment. And immediately her flow of blood stopped. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" When all denied it, Peter and those with him said, Master, the multitudes throng and press you, and you say, who touched me? But Jesus said, somebody touched me, for I perceive power going out from me. Now, when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him. She declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason she had touched him and how she was healed immediately. And he said to her, Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace. While he was still speaking, someone came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, saying to him, Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher. But when Jesus heard it, he answered him, saying, Do not be afraid. Only believe, and she will be made well. When he came into the house, he permitted no one to go in except Peter, James, and John, and the father and the mother of the girl. Now all wept and mourned for her. But he said, Do not weep. She is not dead, but sleeping. And they ridiculed him, knowing that she was dead. But he put them all outside, took her by the hand, and called, saying, Little girl, arise. Then her spirit returned, and she arose immediately. And he commanded that she be given something to eat. And her parents were astonished, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened.
Okay, so a very beautiful story. So to the earlier question about is illness from, demonic power, I think here we're seeing two examples where no, this is physical illness not related to a demonic problem. Okay, so Luke is setting up the two, types of healing. Okay, so he comes back across the lake. Okay, people are waiting for him, right? And then so the ruler of the synagogue comes. So, he could be not necessarily a rabbi, but he could be like a wealthy benefactor, someone that, was financially supporting the synagogue. Okay. I think if it was a rabbi, we probably would have said a Pharisee of the synagogue, but it says a ruler. Okay. So he's basically paying for the bills. He's paying for the scrolls. He's paying for the upkeep. Okay. And he has this only daughter. Okay. 12 years of old. So she's just getting at the age where she can be married. Okay. Obviously very important, for their family, right? But also, for, in a sense, their livelihood too. Like she would have been, when engaged, they would have got a dowry for her. So, there's a lot of implications, obviously the sadness of losing your only daughter. But, this would have been, again, a very life-changing event. Okay. So as he's going, and it says there, the multitudes thronged him. So what does that mean? The multitudes thronged him. They're pressed against him. They're grabbing at him, right? He's going through a crowd. There's pushing, there's shoving, there's people are trying to get at him. You can just imagine a big crowd of people, and he's maybe going through the middle, and everyone's just trying to get their hands on Jesus. And then what happens? One person, yeah, but okay, but what does she touch? Just the board, yeah, the very border, the hem, the bottom of his garment. I have not seen The Chosen. Okay. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. Yep. So hold that thought.
That's not possible.
Well, we'll talk about her illness in a second. Okay. So, and what happened? Then her flow of blood stopped. And he says, who touched me? And no one's like, I didn't touch you. And Peter's like, look, you're in a crowd, like people are grabbing at you. And you say, who touched me? He says, someone touched me because I felt power go out of me. So what's that all about? Like how could all these people be touching him and not have power go out? And this one woman just touches the hem of his garment.
But she needed to be healed.
Yeah, she needed to be healed. And what else? She had faith. She's the only one that touched him, right, with faith. Yeah. She was the only one that touched him with true faith, right?
see version of anatomy. So you can see almost the
Hmm.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit involved with
Yeah.
this, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful, right? I mean, it's just very, very beautiful. So getting back to the unclean part, okay, so she's bleeding, right? So probably like her menstrual, like she's got menstrual bleeding that's not stopping. Okay, so what does that mean? We talked about that before. She's unclean. She's ceremonially unclean. Okay, so if she was ceremonially unclean and just went up to any old rabbi or any other teacher, what would have been the implications of that? It would have, yeah, they probably would have, well, first of all, she'd have been in big trouble because now they were unclean. They were unclean. Okay. They probably would have beat her. They might have beat her to death. Who knows? Okay. Like she would have gotten in big, big trouble. So that's why, again, I mean, you sort of, if okay, take it, it's not Jesus and who he is, but like just any other person claiming to be a healer, like she's taking a big risk in doing this because she's making that person unclean. Okay. And she can get in big trouble. And that's why she only touches the hem of his garment. Like I need to touch him, but I'm only going to touch this very bottom part. Like, so he's not really unclean. Like, I'm not going to really make him unclean because his garment's already dirty. Like, she's like trying to just do the minimum, but because of her faith was so great that she was healed. And that would have been enough. Right.
This means that this woman, at the time she had a flow of blood for 12 years, she was a social outcast. Because she couldn't go visit anyone's house, right? She couldn't be
Right.
around anyone because they
Right.
would become
Right.
unclean also.
Right.
So you have to think about, I mean, this is the way she lived.
Right.
She was a social outcast.
Right.
And in the previous story, it was living in the tomb.
Right. Or the leper.
Yeah, the leper.
The leper. Right. And yes, so to Mark's point, no one could visit her. She wasn't allowed to go out to anybody else's house. Anybody that would have touched her would have been unclean.
Which also would have meant she could never go to the temple.
She never go to the temple. She never go to the synagogue. She couldn't go anywhere.
Father, I have
Yeah.
a question. This is
Yeah.
Roseanne.
Yes.
Why are you considered unclean
So
if you're
unclean does
bleeding?
not mean sinful. It just means you're ceremonially unclean because you're bleeding. So, I mean, just think about it today. I mean, if someone's bleeding, if you're bleeding, you're going to wash your hands, you're going to bandage it up. You won't walk
Right.
around with blood, gushing from your arm so it's just, it was recognized as something that could, transmit disease or just, not be clean, just like your
Okay.
hands were clean. Any bodily fluids, right. And so not just blood, any bodily fluids, we use our imagination. Okay. So you were unclean in a physical sense, but you were also ceremonially unclean according to the Jewish religion, that you couldn't go to the temple and worship,
Oh.
And the same is true. It's not just for women. Remember, I think I said this earlier. It's not just women, it's men too. So if a man was bleeding, couldn't go to the temple. He was unclean as well. Often we
Okay.
associate it with women and their menstrual cycle, but it's more than that. It's any blood. Like if you touched a dead body, or you touch it, let's say you're out in the field, okay, and your friend or your son got injured from the plow. Well, obviously you have to help them stop the bleeding, but you were technically unclean until you went through a ritual of washing over a period of time. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand now.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
God's grace comes not necessarily handle it, but through material process.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. 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 So we have the relics, John, we've got relics of like Saint Seraphim of Sarovs stole, or sometimes maybe a piece of fabric from a saint, not just their bone. So that grace is also transmitted through those physical objects. Okay. And then, Christ congratulates her. Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Okay. So his response is to bless her. Christ isn't afraid, right? To the earlier point, he's not afraid of being unclean or coming in contact with someone unclean because he can't be unclean, right? So that's not an issue for him, right? So, and that's why these rules, sort of passed from the church too. Like, we're in Christ. It's a different outlook that we have, right? We're not going to shy away from somebody who's, ceremonially unclean. Okay, so he goes to the ruler of the synagogue. So imagine, okay, so now you're this ruler of the synagogue, right? So you've gotten Christ, he's agreed to come to your house. There's this commotion, so he's delayed, right? Again, now providence of God here, right? He's delayed. So they get close to the house, and the people come. Don't bother the master. Your daughter's dead. Okay, so just imagine the weight, the emotions of that ruler of the synagogue, right? Okay. Do not, he says, your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher. Okay. But then what does Jesus do? Do not be afraid. Only believe. Okay, so we have to have that faith for ourselves, and she will be made well. So he permits no one to go in the house except Peter, James, and John, so that, the three disciples will, I don't know if we'll get to it tonight with the transfiguration, but there's his sort of inner circle. Okay. Takes him into the house, and the mother and the father of the girl. Okay. He says, do not weep. She's dead. She's not dead, but sleeping. And they ridiculed him, knowing that she was dead. So why does Luke add that?
It shows their unbelief.
Shows their unbelief, but specifically about the fact that they knew she was dead.
This symbolizes the ultimate secrets.
Correct.
It makes one wonder if in fact the Grail is connected with the secret of the presence of the green man in this Holy Grail chapel.
Right, but she's dead. She is dead. So again, just I don't want to overcomplicate it theologically, but it's what's the point? What?
She was actually dead.
Yeah, emphasize that she's dead. Like,
Yeah,
they know what death is.
she didn't just lose consciousness, or she wasn't
Yeah.
in a coma, all that
Right.
stuff. I mean, people knew when other people were dead.
Right. So again, it's going to highlight the miracle, right? It's going to make the miracle even greater, because not only is he's not just healing a girl that has a fever, he's raising this girl from the dead, right? So he's got power over the living and the dead. Okay. Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. So he just performed a great miracle with the woman based on her faith, but this is even going to be a greater miracle because now he's raising this girl from the dead. Okay. So he put them all outside. He took her by the hand. He says, little girl, arise. Okay. Her spirit returned. She rose immediately. And then why do you think Luke added that little comment? And he commanded that she be given something to eat. It would prove that she's alive, right? And she's not a ghost, right? People had all these superstitions. Okay, it's not just her spirit. Okay.
And that's what Jesus did when he came back.
Exactly.
To the resurrection, because he told him to broil fish.
Exactly. Right.
To prove that he was a human.
Right. Okay.
in ancient between Jesus
And her parents were astonished, but he charged them not to tell no one what had happened. So he doesn't want them just whatever he did in the room, we don't know other than him saying, little girl arise.
So
Then he told the man,
this church, like others, so
Right.
told him to go tell everybody, but.
Right.
that was-
Egypt
Right.
and France.
Right. For whatever the circumstance was. Right.
Monetary wealth.
So,
You know, it wasn't changing when we
Their lack of faith.
underneath because where there might not just be spiritual tragedy, but also physical tragedy.
Yeah.
It's been one of the most important quests of all ancient sacred traditions. Gold symbolizes.
Right. They had ridiculed him. Right.
But ultimately, gold
So they're scoffing. They're doubters. Right.
all over the world.
Okay. Any other comments?
Father, it's
Yes.
Leon. At the end of the man with the demons, Christ said, go home and basically tell people what happened and, try to spread the faith.
Yeah.
In this case, he tells the parents to be quiet, don't say anything, but it's a miracle that's based on faith. This seems to be the exact opposite instruction.
Right.
And why, I don't understand that. I mean,
Yeah, so-
being human, I'm sure they wouldn't be able to keep their mouth shut, but so they probably
Yeah,
would
I think
anyway.
it's part of the fact that in verse 53, and they ridiculed him,
Yeah.
which shows their extreme lack of faith and belief.
Mhm.
Okay.
Hmm.
I think that, and then now in the other case that you mentioned with the demoniac, the people believed it wasn't because of lack of faith. It was more like, it said about fear and maybe
Mhm.
because of their livelihood being lost.
Mhm.
He sends the man back, to tell them what the great thing. So I think it's whatever the disposition was of the people,
Mhm. Hmm.
he's saying let's just be quiet about this. They're not ready for it.
Right. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, you wonder, right?
Hmm.
And again, it's interesting that, Jesus uses the name, like we know the guy's name, Jairus, right? I mean, he was probably part of the Christian community. Like, yeah, Jairus's daughter was raised from the dead.
Mhm.
He might still have been alive, or the girl could have been alive, maybe part of the church.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's start chapter 9. We're only gonna chapter 9 has a lot of sort of shorter stories, so it might take us a little bit longer to get through them, but each one is really important. So would someone like to read verses 1 through 9? Okay, Nick, thank you. Read loud for the people on.
Then he called his 12 disciples together and gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. He sent them to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. And he said to them, take nothing for the journey, neither staffs, nor bag, nor bread, nor money. And do not have 2 tunics apiece. Whatever house you enter, stay there, and from there depart. And whoever will not receive you, when you go out of that city, shake off the very dust from your feet as a testimony against them. So they departed and went through the towns, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. Now Herod the Tetrarch heard of all that was done by him, and he was perplexed, because it was said by some that John had risen from the dead, and by some that Elijah had appeared, and by others that one of the old prophets had risen again. Herod said, John I have beheaded, but who is this of whom I hear such things? So he sought to see him.
Okay. So two short stories here, but both very important. So Jesus has, called the 12 together. And then what does he do? He gives them power and authority over demons and to cure diseases. So he's given them the power that he is just exhibiting, right, in these stories that we've been reading. Okay. But what that implies is, right, is that he has this power inherently, so he can give it to other people. Okay. So Peter wouldn't be able to give the power to John, but Christ is able to give the power to all of them. Okay. And then he says there, and then what's the third thing he does? To preach the kingdom of God, right?
The Sumerians were one of the first cultures that built actual cities with streets and a street grid, like almost like New York City, where we have a square street grid.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Right. So if you think about, the Christian priesthood, right? We cast out demons, the exorcism, prayers before baptism. Okay. We do prayers of healing. Okay. Through the sacrament of unction, for example. Right. And we preach the kingdom. Okay. So kind of, some of the same job descriptions are carried through to the Christian community to this day. Okay.
Father, I just have a question.
Yeah.
Somebody's TV is on or something. It's very distracting in the background.
Okay. If someone's online with their TV on, please mute yourself for the time being. Thank you, Roseanne.
Thank you.
And it's interesting when Saint Athanasius wrote a classic book on the incarnation. I think we have it there. But one of the things that he uses as a proof for Christianity is that the pagan religions have been defeated and the demons are cast out. Okay. That the Christian church has the power to throw out demons. Okay. So again, we do this mostly in the exorcist prayers prior to baptism. So if you were here for Will and Abby's baptism, when we started at the back of the church, it's 4 long prayers of exorcism, then they turn and spit on the devil, and then they pronounce the symbol of faith, the creed. Okay. In the Orthodox Church, you won't see as much of the sensationalism you'll see in the Catholic Church around exorcisms. Okay. Not that Orthodox priests do not do some of that, and there are prayers for exorcism written by St. Basil, for example, but that's not something like I've ever been a part of. Okay. But still, it's part of our prayers, and, again, not something we want to mess around with per se, but, it is a mark of Christianity that the church has the authority, okay, to cast out demons. Okay. Now what about the saying there, take nothing for the journey, neither staffs, nor bag, nor bread, or money, and do not have 2 tunics apiece? Right.
Should be able to get it in the way, get it in that town.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to have faith that God will provide. Okay. And that, you're not going to, you're not doing this to make money. Okay. And if you remember, so in the book of Acts, there's a character, Simon Magnus, who wants to buy the power that Peter had. Okay. And he was condemned for that. Okay. And then St. Paul makes the point that when he's preaching, he's working with his hands. He was a tent maker. He's providing for his own livelihood. He's not dependent on the people for their money. Okay. And even way back, like if you look at other early Christian documents, one of the signs given for someone who's a true prophet or not a prophet is what? The true prophet does not ask for money. Okay. So again, we have to be very careful about, and there's, like a priest could never sell like the sacraments. I mean, that would be automatic. You're deposed. Okay. And that's why even some church, like we don't charge for like a baptism. We don't charge for a wedding. Some churches do. And, it's, under the sort of the idea of like, well, you're using the space and, you're turning on the heat or the electric. But it's like, again, there can be a very fine line. Like, okay, well, how much does it cost to run the electric bill for an hour at the church? I don't know. A couple bucks. Okay, and well, we're charging $250 for a baptism. Well, that's sort of like, what are we doing? So you got to, again, not that, there's just a very fine line you have to be careful of when you're dealing with some of this stuff. Okay. So obviously if you use the church, yeah, you should give a free will offering to the church and say, well, we're covering some expense and people's time and, etc. But you gotta be very careful with that. Okay. So also, and then the way that they're doing this is a sign to the people what it means to like preach, the kingdom of God. So again, focused on money, well, that's what you're going to get. That's your reward. That's going to, you're not going to have any more reward than what you're asking for. Okay. And then what about this little part about Herod? So which Herod is this? Right. So this is Herod who beheaded John the Baptist. Okay. His father was Herod the Great, who was the one that tried to kill the Christ child. Okay. Now this is his son, I believe Andy said Herod Antipas. Okay. That name is given elsewhere. Okay. So, right. So he just killed John the Baptist and he's perplexed. So why is he perplexed? Okay. So Kathy said he's perplexed because people are still following around this prophet, but what is he worried about? What's the next phrase? That this is John the Baptist raised from the dead. It was said that by some that John had risen from the dead. And by some that Elijah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. We're getting a force. And we're getting in Peter's confessions coming up too. Because again, people we're gonna see Jesus says, and again, not to get too far ahead, who do people say that I am? Well, you're John the Baptist raised from the dead. You're Elijah. You're Moses. You're Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Then he's going to say, well, who do you say that I am? Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay. But Herod is not like, this isn't just curiosity. This isn't like, okay, he wants to see Jesus because he heard great things about him. He's scared. He's paranoid. He's wondering what is going on here. I thought I killed this prophet, in the woods, and now there's this other guy walking around named Jesus. Yeah.
Even like a copycat concerns
Yeah.
for like a copycat.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, Marianne, if you couldn't hear, she's saying, he thought he had solved the problem, and he's not as powerful as he thinks he is, right? And that's why his dad was afraid when he heard from the Magi, like, because the Magi see the star and they think, oh, the king of Judah is born. So they go to Herod and say, we saw the star in the sky. And Herod's like, oh, we'll find out where he is so I can come worship him. But no, and it says, he and all of Jerusalem was scared when the Magi came. Everyone was in an uproar. Okay. So, this Herod, it's not like, oh, I want to go see him and maybe he can enlighten my mind. No, he's afraid. Okay.